Goal 1.
The pickup truck was going east on Sunset Boulevard, heading downtown. Santiago and his father were crammed into the open back along with 3 more gardeners and an assortment of machines and gardening tools, including the leaf blower. Santiago checked his watch, then unzipped a sports bag and began pulling out his soccer gear. He took off his t-shirt and slipped on a faded striped shirt. The other guys took little notice. It had been a long, hot, tiring day. They were saving their little remaining energy for pulling the top from a bottle of beer when they got home. As Santiago took out his shoes, with their distinctive red and yellow laces, the old guy sitting opposite decided to show a little interest. "How you guys doing this year?" Santiago shrugged his shoulders. "2 of our best players were picked up by immigration. Maybe they'll make it back for the playoffs." He checked his watch again. "That's if we make it to the playoffs. I'm late." By the time the truck pulled up to the curb, Santiago was changed and ready to play. He jumped over the tailgate and went running off toward the park. Concrete overpasses towered over 3 soccer fields and a baseball diamond, all of which were squeezed into an area surrounded by industrial units. The match had already begun, and as Santiago arrived, the Americanitos coach, Cesar, was prowling the touchline, a cigarette dangling from his lips. It was many years since Cesar had played soccer. His potbelly was too big for even the outsize pants he wore. But he knew a good player when he saw one. "What's the score?" asked Santiago, waving both arms toward the referee in an attempt to attract his attention. "We're 1 down and you're late. Get in there." The ball went out of play, and as Cesar tottered off to fetch it, the referee came over to where Santiago was standing and pointed at his legs. "I don't want anyone hurt. No shin pads, no game." Shin pads were a luxury Santiago had never quite managed to afford, but the problem had arisen before, so he knew exactly what to do. Close to the playing field, a couple of overflowing garbage cans were almost hidden by a pile of discarded cardboard boxes. Santiago grabbed one and tore off 2 rectangular pieces. From a distance, they could almost have been shin pads. He stuffed one into each of his socks and looked at the referee. "Okay?" The ref shrugged and beckoned Santiago onto the field. Field was a generous, if loose, description. It was rock-hard and almost grass-free, and the corner flags were 3 oil drums and the remnants of an old baby stroller. But that didn't matter to Santiago. The game was all that mattered. The game was what he lived for. He jogged to his usual position up front, smiling as he saw the relief on the faces of some of his teammates now that their star player had made his belated entrance. For a few minutes, Santiago felt his way into the game, moving with speed and grace, making deft layoffs and taking up perfect positions the other Americanitos never quite managed to read or exploit. He was way ahead of the game, but not yet fully in it, so he dropped a little deeper. Then he got his chance. One chance was usually all he needed. He made some space for himself and collected a hopeful punt out of defense. Almost casually, he rounded one lumbering defender, flat-footed another, and then closed on the goal. From the edge of the box, he curled a rising shot past the helpless and astonished keeper. He could almost hear the legendary Mexican commentator Andres Cantor screaming, "Goal!" Even when he was on vacation, Glenn Foy took his football seriously. He couldn't help it. St. James Park or a park in the San Fernando Valley? Shearer and Company or a bunch of 7-year-olds? Football was football. It was a serious business. Glenn was staying with his daughter, Val, who lived in Southern California with her husband and 2 young sons. And one of those sons, 7-year-old Tom, was out there on the field while his granddad and mom watched from the touchline, shouting their encouragement. Only in Glenn's case, it wasn't exactly encouragement. "Keep your position, Tom. Stop bunching up. You're meant to be on the wing." "Dad," said Val, "it's not the Cup final. They're 7 years old." "Best to start 'em young." Glenn's accent was an unusual mix of Southern Ireland and the northeast of England. He'd lived in and around Newcastle for most of his adult life. At 48, he'd put on a few pounds since his heyday, but still looked in pretty good shape, especially with his suntan. On the far side of the field, a group of young moms were reliving their cheerleader days. "Go, Wildcats, go!" The young kids swept across the field like a swarm of angry bees. But Glenn's grandson appeared to be on the periphery of most of the action. "Come on, lad, get in there!" Val rested one hand on Glenn's shoulder. "Easy, Dad. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure Tom's heart is really in soccer." "Soccer," muttered Glenn disdainfully. "Soccer. The game's called football." He sighed and turned away. There was a senior game taking place on the adjacent field. A team of Hispanics taking on a tough-looking bunch of Europeans wearing the shirts of the Croatian national team. One player immediately stood out. The young Hispanic picked up the ball at around the halfway line and then, with a deceptive burst of speed, eased his way first past one and then another defender before sending a perfectly weighted pass across the field. Glenn lost interest in the kids' match. The young player was dictating the game, frequently making fools of the opposition while at the same time making his teammates look far better than they were. Glenn slowly edged his way along the touchline, close to where a pot-bellied Hispanic guy with a cigarette dangling from his mouth stood bawling instructions to his team. But not once did Glenn's eyes shift from the young player. Even when he didn't have the ball, he was good. The movement, the runs, the feints and dummies. He collected the ball, beat one player, and was then hacked down by a crunching tackle from behind. "Aye, aye," whispered Glenn. "He won't like that." But the young player simply got to his feet and gave his opponent a withering look that said, "Is that the best you can do?"